You're listening to Rubble and Ruin. Welcome to the End, a dystopian zombie story told in 12 parts, written by Jarrett Rush and produced by SciFi Serials.com. Part 7. Caroline is still asleep. I kneel next to her and rock her by the shoulder. Her eyes resist opening, but she slowly sits up. Yeah? It's a response that seems to need all of her energy to give. I need you awake, I say. Once this little bubble you've created pops, we're going to be in the same boat as we were before. She takes a couple of deep breaths, then stands on wobbly legs and looks at me. Her face startles. I'm still in my goofy mask, and I'm sure I appear like some kind of odd monster. I raise my hand, sort of an I come in peace gesture. She looks away and starts surveying our position. I can see the fog of confusion begin to fade. She looks to the top of the dome above us and sees the rain still coming down. How far does this go? She asks. Couple blocks. Wailers. Still there, waiting for us to come back out. Thunder crashes outside. Wailers cry out. Then we hear the rain. Hard to tell from here, but it must be slowing. I gather the things from my pack that are still in a pile on top of our stack of rubble. I reload everything carefully, wanting to make sure that the backpack is balanced once we start walking back to camp. Caroline has already pulled her pack on her back. She's holding the machete loose at her sides. The stove, she asks. Where is it? I shake my head no. Leave it. Caroline watches me climb down the pile and asks, We have a plan? Not yet, I say. But we need one. Mine right now is pretty simple. She swings the machete out in front of her. Fight. Figure that one out while you were off dreaming? Like this little hedge of protection? Then you'll allow me to sleep a few minutes. This, she rainbows both arms above her head, takes a lot out of a girl. And I'm forever grateful. We are approaching the edge of our dome, and the mud rain has slowed dramatically. I'm expecting a herd of wailers just outside the dome trying to claw their way through the light and energy. But they aren't there. None of them. The city looks wet and empty. Where? Caroline starts but doesn't finish. They were here earlier, just a few minutes ago. They were screaming at me, crying out, trying to get in. I don't get it. And just like that, Caroline flares her fingers. Poof. They were gone. She smiles and giggles. Glad this is funny. Oh, lighten up, old man. Caroline makes some kind of gesture with her hand, and our bubble pops, disintegrating into 1,000 pinpoints of light that all blink off at once. That's when we see it. A body. Not a wailer. A human. It's laying across the middle of the street about a block ahead, clearly beaten and broken. Clearly dead. Caroline puts her hand to her mouth, and I gently guide her down another block. I still have my gun out. The wailers aren't visible, but they aren't gone. We walk quiet for a few blocks, then see another body, this one in worse shape. Whoever he is, he went down fighting. We pass wide on the opposite sidewalk and Caroline finally speaks. Who are these people? I don't have an answer for her, as much as I'd like to be able to give her one. I don't really think she's expecting me to actually say anything. We turn another corner and head back toward Fair Park. Things only get more gruesome. We quickly come up on 3 more bodies, or what's left of them. There are more remains farther ahead. Caroline begins to cry. We stop walking, and I put an arm around her. She rolls her head into my chest, and her whimpers turn to sobs. This is all overwhelming to me. I can't imagine what it's doing to a teenager. The only way we escaped this same fate was magic. Literal magic. Our little lean-to shelter was nice for a moment, but it had barely been keeping us protected from the elements. Without Caroline's magic bubble, we'd be out here dead in the wet Dallas streets. I whisper a thank you into Caroline's ear and feel her nod her response into my chest. Her crying has calmed, and she turns away from me. Let's get back to camp, she says, but let's find another way. I agree, and we turn back and start walking through deep Elm. It's an old warehouse district that's turned into mostly come-and-go night spots and restaurants. And apparently, it's where many of Dallas's survivors headed to when they had nowhere else to go. The number of bodies here is worse. They are all over the streets, numbers in the dozens down each block. We do our best to avoid passing as many as we can. Somehow that feels respectful. To avoid the temptation to gawk. Plus, it helps Caroline stay calm. I also try to distract her with conversation. So when you said you weren't really into the magic thing and your mom told me that you never really took to it, was that some organized campaign to lie to me? She smiles. Just a bit. I'm really not into it, but I know some stuff. Just small stuff? Like how to make a candy bar appear out of nowhere, poof up a hall pass for a friend at school, or to create an impenetrable, hard-shelled dome of light. Yeah, stuff like that. Why didn't you two want to tell me? The magic thing doesn't always go over well. Some people want candy bars and hall passes. Others want nothing to do with you. I didn't want you. We didn't want you or anyone to cast us off on our own. We had an agreement to not say anything to anyone or do anything that would pull back that curtain unless we just absolutely had to. That's what your mom said when I asked the same thing. We walk in silence, passing fewer bodies than we had before. Fewer, but not none. Caroline cuts a wide path around them whenever we come upon them, and I just follow her lead. The number of bodies is surprising. I want to bring it up to Caroline. Say that I didn't know this many people were still alive, or at least around Dallas, but I figure that it's best not to say anything. Still, I'd assumed that because the people I knew about were gathered in little pockets, like at our camp or at the one in Mesquite, then that's all there were. I hadn't considered that some would just huddle up on their own, keep their heads down and try to survive. It adds a layer of sadness to all of this. Bring these people into our camp, and we could have had something of a little society. A community, at least. Strength in numbers. I think back to what JR said about the church in Oklahoma. It feels like a better idea now. At least it's a proactive one. Trying to build something. Trying to build numbers. Build strength. People like Caroline and Maggie would be valuable in a society like that. They've kept me alive so far, and that was the real truth. I've had 2 moments since all of this happened that I shouldn't have survived. 2 moments when the wailers should have gotten to me, but they didn't. And that's only because I stumbled into these magic ladies' camp early on. Dumb luck, destiny, or providence. I didn't care. We pause at an intersection, and I let Caroline pick our path. Do we tell your mom about what happened? I ask, while she decides which way we head next. I'd rather not. We go right. It's going to take us longer to get back to camp, but if it makes Caroline more comfortable, then a few minutes detour is worth it. Why keep it a secret? I ask. Because Mom doesn't know I can do any of it. She doesn't? Why? I made too big a stink about not being interested in it when I was younger. I didn't know how to tell her I'd changed my mind. So you had your sister teach you some stuff? Yeah, but mostly books. I'd study them at night when Mom was at work, making sure to be careful about putting them back so she wouldn't see them disturbed. They have books on this kind of stuff? Nothing you can get at the store. But, yeah, there are books. And real books, too. Not some kind of thick, leather-bound volume you see in movies with all that frilly handwriting that's hard to read. We pass under the interstate and are nearing camp. The neighborhood turns residential here. Older houses, smaller. The population mostly lower income. The number of bodies in the road has dropped and everything is painted in a light brown thanks to the mud rain. But there's something different about the neighborhood. It looks worse, more ransacked, more destroyed. Caroline notices at about the same time I do, and her pace picks up. What are you thinking? She knows what I'm asking about. Something has happened. Wailers have been here. These houses look torn apart, and it's only getting worse the closer we get to camp. It's all visible now. Claw marks, boards snapped, obviously fresh breaks. Caroline's walk turns to a jog, then to a full run. I'm following behind her best I can, but my pack is slowing me down. She's a few hundred feet ahead of me. I call out for her, but she doesn't stop. We enter Fair Park through a side entrance. She's so far in front of me that I lose her. She's turned a corner one way, and I've gone another. I turn toward the Ferris wheel, and that's when I hear her scream. It stops me cold. I break into as much of a sprint as I can, and a few moments later see Walter. He's gone, brutalized and lying in a heap near a planter box. Caroline is sitting near him. She's holding a scarf that Maggie was wearing before the rain. It's soaked in dripping water, but Caroline has it up to her face. It's covering her mouth, but I can still hear her muffled cries. I drop down to comfort her, and she falls into my arms. She's inconsolable, so I just hold her. We stay like this for a few minutes. I keep glancing over at Walter and saying a brief thank you that we weren't here last night. That's when I notice the rest of the park. It's in shambles. Trees are uprooted. Stucco has been pulled from the sides of buildings. Large chunks of the sidewalk have been pulled up. This wasn't a small number of wailers that did this. It had to be hundreds. More, maybe. I can't imagine being here. Walter was probably overrun quickly, but I don't imagine he went without a fight. Maggie either, and that's what I try to tell Caroline. She pulls back and looks up at me. She might not be gone. What? I ask. This is just her scarf. It's not her. She could have dropped it or something. I could have been pulled off. It's a possibility. I agree. I'm going to go look for her, she says. Then I'll go too, I say. We can split up. If we find her, she'll probably need help. Better to locate her sooner rather than later. Caroline heads for the midway. I go toward the exhibit halls. Hey, I call out. Caroline turns. Meet back here in 30 minutes. It's going to be dark. We need a plan to get us through the night. She gives me a thumbs up, then heads off again. I'm trying to remain hopeful. I tell myself that Maggie's smart. She's resourceful. She's magical. All those could get her through whatever this attack was. I dig into a pile of crumbled stucco, seeing if maybe the side of the wall of the food court had fallen on her. Then I climb over the pile to see if she's somehow been stuck inside. She hasn't. The building is dark and cold and heavily damaged, but it's dry. It's a possibility for tonight. I circle the building, but Maggie isn't here. I move on. I'm walking toward the automobile building when I hear Caroline call from behind me. She's yelling my name. I turn quickly, expecting the worst. Did you find her? I realize that my voice sounds panicked, and I try to calm myself. Caroline is shaking her head before I even finish my sentence. She's not at the midway, but we'll find her. Caroline has a confidence that I wish I could muster. It's been a half hour, she continues. You'd said we should stop. Let's not yet, I say, and start walking again. I head for what's left of the automobile buildings. Caroline joins me. There are normally statues in front of the buildings, 4 of them. They are framed by narrow, tall arches. Not anymore. The statues have been pulled down, Art Deco relics that are now in pieces on the ground. Large chunks have ended up in the reflecting pool that runs between the 2 buildings. The arches are also gone. A bad feeling starts working its way up from my toes. It tingles my ankles, punches at my knees, and crawls up my back. We get near the entry to the first building. The doors have also been pulled off their hinges. Caroline comes to a stop, and I pause with her. She's struck by something. I don't see it at first. Then, there it is. Blood. It's streaked across the damp ground. It moves across our path and away from the automobile buildings. Caroline begins to follow the trail, and I follow her. We lose the trail in a fountain, but pick it up on the other side. It passes in front of the Hall of State, another big Art Deco monster that used to have a curved entry that was taller than the rest of the building and a colonnade that stretched across its front. Both are gone now. The entry was taken out by a rock that first night, the columns destroyed by wailers. It's a shell now, the doors still intact. Not even wailers could get through the pile of rubble that laid at the entrance. Caroline is well ahead of me now. Her pace has picked up, and I'm chasing her again. She disappears around a corner that heads toward the area of the park given to livestock, and that's when I hear her scream. She's found her. That bad feeling consumes me. I run and find Caroline on the ground, brought to her knees. Her hands are covering her face, and her screams are fighting with sobs. I look up, and there's Maggie, her body leaning against the deep orange wall of the food and fiber building. She's cut across her front, half a dozen slash marks that have gone deep into her chest. There's something in her hand. It looks like a piece of rebar, probably something she pulled out of the crumbled remains of one of these buildings. I leave Caroline and move to get a better look. If it's as bad as it seems, then Caroline doesn't need to see her mom like this. It's bad. The gashes across her chest are only the biggest of dozens. They cover her arms and legs. Her clothes are cut to sloppy ribbons. She clearly went down fighting. Not surprising. But I wonder why she hadn't tried some of her magic like Caroline had. It takes concentration, Caroline says from behind me. Wait, I tell her, and put my hands out in front of me in an attempt to stop her. She steps around me and kneels in front of Maggie. You were wondering what good being able to do magic is if you can't use it to save yourself. I don't respond. It takes concentration, Caroline says. She puts her hand on Maggie's. I reach up and pass a hand in front of Maggie's face and force her eyes to close. You need to have a moment to connect with the universe, to pull down the power that you need to finish whatever it is you are wanting to do. The older you are, the longer it takes. The bigger the spell, the more energy you need. Clearly, she didn't have time. Not from looking around here. Not seeing what happened. She didn't stand a chance. Neither did Walter or Britt or Bethany. They were overrun. I still don't know what to say. I've never been in a position like this. A friend in college lost his mom, but we weren't kneeling in front of the body, staring into her face. He was gone. She died in a hospital. It was also Hollywood. He came back to campus and we gave him space. I need Caroline. She needs me. Space is something we can't afford. I stand up and give Caroline a moment to do whatever it is she needs to do. I back away far enough that whatever she's saying to Maggie is just noise. It sounds like distant mumbling. It could be some kind of mystic thing that they do, but likely it's just a daughter saying a premature goodbye to her mother. Caroline stands and turns. Her cheeks are wet. She wipes a tear and says, "We have to bury her." Here? You have a better place? I can't answer that, because I don't have another idea. Caroline tries to lift Maggie, but she can't. Maggie had a couple inches and more than a couple of pounds on her daughter. I step in and lift her from the ground, one arm under her knees, the other across her back. Her body is heavy without her helping support any of the weight, and I take it slow down the few steps there are, leading to the food and fiber building. I follow Caroline back to where our camp had been. We pass Walter's body, and Caroline points toward her mother's bedroll. "There," she says. "We'll go find a place to bury her in the morning." It's beginning to get dark. I go lift Walter. He's heavier than Maggie, and in worse shape. He's awkward to handle in ways that a human body isn't supposed to be. I lay him in his little space that he'd claimed, and join Caroline up near where they usually install the big cowboy statue when the fair is in session. "This was Mom's favorite thing," she says, a big smile painted on her face. "She loved the fair. I think that's why she chose this as the place we ran to. It was a safe space for her. Good memories. Plus, it's pretty open," I say. Caroline is looking up like she can see the cowboy now, lost in some mist-filled magic world. Who knows? Maybe she can see him. We'd come once a week whenever the fair was going. Maybe more often if she got a deal on tickets. Every time, even if we'd come the day before, she'd make us take a goofy picture in front of big techs. The first were usually all smiles. We'd get a corn dog from a stand over there, Caroline points. Put mustard all down the front and hold them up in front of us with big techs in the back. She stares up into the nothing for a minute more, then turns and walks off. I follow. "I was thinking that tonight we could stay in the food court," I say. "It's covered. The doors are unlocked." Caroline shakes her head. "Tonight?" she says. "I'm sleeping by Mom."